A sudden downpour came down so hard that even the wipers on my new Lexus could not keep up. I pulled over, ran into a cafe, and unexpectedly saw my husband there, also waiting out the rain. He was not alone. Another woman was sitting on his lap. It took only a second for everything to register. His face drained of color the instant he saw me, and his body went completely still. The woman noticed immediately and asked him 3 times, "Are you okay?" He did not respond. When she finally turned to follow his gaze, she jumped up as if shocked. I took 2 unsteady steps back when I realized who she was. Before I explain that, please like the video and comment with the city you live in. My name is Stella. I am 36 years old, and I work as a heart surgeon. That Tuesday afternoon, Boston was hit by an unusually severe storm. It was not the typical August rain, but a heavy, wind-driven downpour that felt almost deliberate. I left the hospital later than planned, my lab coat still carrying the smell of antiseptic, mentally drained after an 8-hour surgery on a veteran injured in a car crash. Driving through the Back Bay, the rain became so intense that even at full speed, the wipers could not clear the windshield. I turned into a familiar cafe near Beacon Street, a place I often stopped to collect myself before going home. As I opened the door, a small bell rang, mixing with the smell of fresh coffee. In one instant, everything stopped. In a dim corner by the window sat my husband, Daniel, the head of a major insurance company. A blonde woman was seated fully on his lap, her arms around his neck, her body pressed against his. His hand rested on her stomach with an ease that showed this was not new. When he looked up and saw me, his face went pale, his throat tightening as if he had lost his breath. The woman sensed the change and asked quietly what was wrong. He did not answer. She asked again, more sharply, but his eyes remained fixed on me. On the third attempt, she followed his line of sight. Her expression changed instantly. She stood up so fast that her coffee cup fell and shattered on the floor, cutting through the cafe noise. That was when I fully understood who she was. Riley. Riley, who was engaged to Gabriel. Gabriel, my closest friend since high school, who had supported me through the most difficult periods of my life. I stood still as everything aligned with painful clarity. This was not only my husband's betrayal, it involved 2 families and the most trusted relationships in my life. I did not confront them. I did not ask questions or raise my voice. I turned around, walked out, and left behind the warmth of the cafe and 2 people caught in a moment they never expected to face. The rain outside was relentless. As I got into my car, it struck the windshield so loudly that it drowned out any other sound. I drove without thinking, familiar streets feeling unfamiliar. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. 1 call, then another, then several more. At a red light near the Charles River, I glanced down and saw it was the 12th call. By the time I reached my neighborhood, there had been 23. I did not answer, not because I could not, but because I knew what I would hear. Panic-driven explanations and rushed excuses. The calls stopped briefly, then a voicemail came through. I played it while parked. Daniel's voice was unsteady but controlled. He said it was a misunderstanding and asked for a chance to explain. I stopped the message halfway. Some images cannot be undone by explanations. I sat there watching the rain trace lines down the glass and understood that reacting emotionally would only make me lose control. I opened my messages and sent the same short sentence to both Daniel and Riley, with no added context. Rest assured, I won't do anything foolish like you 2 might be hoping. I placed the phone face down and took a slow breath. That message was not meant to calm them. It was meant to unsettle them. Silence, not anger, is what frightens people who know they are guilty. I imagined Daniel staring at his phone, waiting for another message that would not come. I imagined Riley rereading the sentence, trying to decide what it meant. The phone buzzed a few more times, then went quiet. That quiet was not relief. It was fear. Fear that I had told Gabriel, that I had evidence, or that I was calmly planning something they could not anticipate. I did not need to act further that night. Waiting was enough. I drove toward downtown but did not turn onto the road leading home. I was not ready to enter the house where everything now felt suspect. Instead, I stopped at the Mandarin Oriental in Back Bay. The hotel was bright and detached from everything that had just happened. At the front desk, I gave my name with a steady voice, took the room key, and wheeled my small suitcase into the elevator. My reflection in the metal doors showed no tears, only a heavy stillness. In the room, I turned off my phone's ringer and stood by the window, looking out over Boston at night. The city moved on as usual. I was suspended between remaining silent and deciding, deliberately, what would come next. I slept very little, not from crying, but because memories kept surfacing, forcing me to reassess the relationships that had once seemed unbreakable. Gabriel was the first face to emerge from my memories. I had known him since the final years of high school in Boston, back when life was simpler and friendships were straightforward. We shared classes, studied together, and went through times where friends became like a second family. To me, Gabriel was always more like an older brother, someone who understood me deeply without needing words. Riley entered the picture later, during college. She loved Gabriel intensely and had been by his side for over 10 years, supporting him from his early struggles to the start of his career. I once saw that endurance as proof of love, but over time, I noticed the subtle tension, the fleeting glances Riley gave whenever Gabriel and I spoke, the seemingly casual questions with hidden suspicion, the silences that only those involved could feel. All suggested something deeper. She never accused me outright, but the jealousy was always present, quiet and persistent. Between Gabriel and me, there was never anything inappropriate. No ambiguous messages, no hidden touches, nothing requiring secrecy. Ironically, that purity seemed to unsettle Riley more. When there's no fault to hold on to, imagination fills the gaps. I realized that the past I thought solid had likely been distorted in Riley's mind long ago. Perhaps I had never truly been a threat to her. I was just a convenient excuse. The next morning, after finishing my shift, my phone vibrated endlessly in my lab coat pocket. I didn't need to check to know who it was. 12 missed calls, all from Riley, followed by a long message that shifted from pleading to anxious. She begged for a chance to explain. I didn't respond immediately. Nearly an hour later, I sent a single short line, cold but polite. We can meet. We arranged to meet at a small tea shop near the hospital, a quiet place I often used to gather myself between shifts. I arrived first, chose a table by the window, and ordered tea. When Riley arrived, something was immediately different. A loose coat, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach, her figure no longer as lean as before. No words were necessary. Riley avoided my eyes, her voice small and quick, rehearsed. You misunderstood. I was just asking your husband for help with maternity insurance. He works in insurance, you know. Her smile was strained and unconvincing. I didn't interrupt. The subtle bulge beneath her clothes was impossible to ignore. I opened my phone, turned the screen toward her, and displayed the photo from the cafe. Riley on Daniel's lap, his hand exactly where she now tried to conceal it. The cafe photo made the truth undeniable. Riley stared at it silently, lips moving but no sound coming out. Slowly, she pushed the phone back toward me. She wasn't ashamed. What I saw in her was calculation, not regret. Her eyes hardened. You don't understand the whole situation, she said, voice low and controlled. It's way more complicated than what you saw. She shifted the blame onto me, describing pressure, moments of weakness, and how my closeness to Gabriel had supposedly made things harder. I was no longer the betrayed one, I was the troublemaker. Then she brought up Gabriel as a shield. You know how much he loves me. We're getting married, over 10 years together. Do you really think if he had to choose, he'd believe you? The question was rhetorical, a quiet threat. Riley implied that speaking up would paint me as jealous, inventing my own tragedy. You're a doctor, she said with a thin smile. You know how people will interpret this, a photo, a moment, twisted. I remained calm. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that her fear wasn't the truth. It was that I now controlled the narrative. Unbeknownst to her, I had turned on the recorder in my lab coat pocket the moment she sat down. Every word, accusation, and veiled threat was captured. I didn't need to reveal it yet. I would let her continue exposing herself while believing I was still cornered. The next morning, I left the hotel earlier than usual and drove to my therapist's office in the South End, a place I had visited during the most stressful years of my career. The room's soft lighting and faint scent of essential oils contrasted sharply with the chaos in my mind. I recounted everything from the cafe in the rain to the tea shop meeting. She listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she paused, then asked slowly and clearly, "Do you see the pattern?" I started to answer, but she continued calmly and firmly. "This is a classic pattern of manipulation. It starts with pleading to buy time. When pleading fails, it shifts to blaming to make the victim doubt themselves. And when that fails, the final step is always a threat, not of violence, but of fear. Fear of isolation, misunderstanding, or being labeled the destroyer." Her words brought clarity. I asked the question that had haunted me. Should I tell Gabriel now? She shook her head. Timing mattered. Without irrefutable evidence, revealing the truth would play into the manipulator's hands. She advised me to observe, let them reveal themselves, and avoid letting emotion dictate my actions. I left the office with a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. The pain remained, but it no longer ruled me. I returned to the hotel, closed the door, and opened my laptop with purpose, not to escape, but to examine facts. I logged into the joint account Daniel and I shared, one I rarely checked. The statements revealed repeated suspicious charges. Luxury hotels in Boston and New York during my absences, a silent trip to Hawaii, and then a $12,000 Louis Vuitton purchase. Never for me. 2 more transactions appeared at a private gynecology clinic, spaced weeks apart. As a cardiologist, I'm trained to interpret numbers and patterns. In that moment, everything connected. The timing of the payments matched Riley's changing body, Daniel's claimed business trips, and the period when I naively believed our marriage was normal. The evidence, clear and precise, revealed the depth of their betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. A thought I had avoided for weeks now surfaced with uncomfortable clarity. If Riley is pregnant and these expenses aren't related to Gabriel, the most logical conclusion is that the child isn't his. It's my husband's. I didn't act on it immediately. I only let myself feel the shift from doubt as emotion to doubt as hypothesis, a problem demanding proof. From that moment, I knew I wouldn't rely on their stories. I would follow the evidence, one number at a time. As the financial details aligned in my mind, an old memory returned. A few months earlier, Gabriel and I had spoken briefly during a routine checkup. He mentioned Riley with subtle concern. She had changed, dressing more boldly, wearing heavier makeup, expensive perfumes, and carrying designer handbags beyond what her jewelry store job could afford. When asked, she laughed it off, claiming the items were gifts from clients. At the time, I dismissed it. Now, the pattern was clear. Gabriel may have suspected, but denial had allowed it all to continue. I sat for a long time by the hotel window watching Boston at night and realized that what drove me now wasn't anger. It was the need for irrefutable evidence. Phones hold the most revealing records. Messages may be deleted, but digital traces remain. I needed a calm plan to disarm them. I messaged Riley first, soft and conciliatory, saying I'd thought it over, decided to forgive, and wanted to end things quietly for Gabriel's sake. Not because I believed her, but to make her believe me. Soon after, Daniel called, relief evident in his voice. That evening, he arrived at the Mandarin Oriental with flowers, performing the role of remorseful husband flawlessly. On the drive home, he spoke of the future, making amends and leaving the past behind. I listened, nodded when appropriate, and remained silent otherwise. I knew this was when he would be most vulnerable. At home, when Daniel showered, I calmly picked up his phone. I knew where to look. In the trash folder of the video album, I found an hour-long file. Riley to Gabriel. I opened it. They were in my bedroom, on the bed I had once considered safe. The timestamp matched the days I had been in Vermont caring for my father. There was no room for doubt. I didn't cry. The shock transformed into cold, clear awareness. I understood that staying silent, playing the understanding wife, would only sacrifice me. I deleted the video, washed my hands thoroughly, and studied my reflection. This was no longer the face of a betrayed spouse. It was the face of someone who understood the rules and wouldn't lose. I knew rage wouldn't serve me. I needed patience. I messaged Riley again that morning, gentle in tone, reiterating forgiveness and a desire for peace. That evening, lying next to my husband, I spoke casually about missing social gatherings. He suggested an anniversary party for our 8th year, eager to please. I agreed outwardly, but in my mind, the party was already a controlled stage for the truth. The evening arrived at a luxurious Boston hotel. I arrived early, neutral dress, composed expression, every detail planned. Guests arrived, unaware of the purpose behind the celebration. Daniel's colleagues, family, and friends mingled, all appearances normal. Then I saw Gabriel and Riley enter. She placed a hand lightly on her stomach, face carefully composed. I greeted them politely, maintaining the calm exterior. Their presence completed the stage. As glasses were raised and soft music played, I stepped forward, allowing the pause to stretch just long enough to capture attention. I nodded to the technician. The screen lit up. No introduction, no music, only the raw video. Daniel and Riley, clearly in my bedroom. A gasp echoed. Daniel froze, his face pale. Riley stepped back instinctively, then the audio recording played. Riley's voice, unedited, captured every accusation, every manipulation, her use of Gabriel as a shield, her warning that I would appear jealous if I spoke. Gabriel's head bowed, fists clenched, a man watching his world crumble. Finally, a document appeared on the screen. A DNA test. Daniel's name was listed as the biological father, 99% certainty circled in bold. A glass dropped. Someone covered their mouth. Heads turned toward Daniel's boss. The room was silent. The truth was out, undeniable, witnessed by all. Not a whisper, not a murmur, only the heavy silence of those who had just witnessed the truth laid bare. I stood under the lights, not trembling, not crying, understanding that from this moment, the story no longer belonged to anyone's words. The truth had spoken, loud and irreversible. The silence held a few more seconds before Gabriel stepped forward. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Riley. That gaze belonged no longer to a man about to marry, but to someone awakening from a long, toxic dream. His voice was steady and clear. The wedding was off. No permission sought, no explanation given, just one sentence, severing over 10 years of attachment in front of witnesses. Riley froze, lips moving as if to speak, but no one waited. What followed unfolded quickly. Whispers erupted, phones came out, and eyes shifted. For someone like Riley, whose life depended on image, the collapse was immediate. Her job at the jewelry store ended within days via a short, cold phone call. Her reputation unraveled faster than any defense could repair. Daniel faced consequences immediately as well. His boss left the party early, disappointment clear, and a few days later, Daniel was fired. Doors he had thought secure now closed one by one. I stood amid all that ruin, not triumphant, not hollow, but with stark clarity. The truth alone dismantles those who choose deceit. For the first time in years, I no longer stood in the eye of the storm. I had stepped out of it. I filed for divorce on a quiet Boston morning, signature placed with precision. I left our 3-bedroom home and moved into a smaller apartment, one free from old memories, offering lightness and a long-denied peace. As life settled, I pursued a long-postponed dream, visiting the Boston Animal Shelter. Among the familiar scents and sounds, I found him. A canine dog. Steady, calm, carrying the weight of a past abandoned. We understood each other immediately. 2 days later, I brought him home. For the first time in years, I didn't return to an empty apartment. Our old house sold shortly after, and the divorce finalized 3 months later. Assets split 50-50, fair and impartial. I left the courtroom feeling complete, not because of money, but because I had preserved myself. Months passed quietly but steadily. My work as a cardiologist flourished. I was appointed head of the department for my dedication, not personal drama. Conferences across the country followed, and at a symposium in Manhattan, I met David. He impressed not through charm, but through listening, through understanding the challenges only someone in our field could know. Conversations about techniques, complex cases, and difficult decisions stretched an entire afternoon. Love grew quietly, naturally. No lightning bolt, no grand declarations, only calm, mutual understanding. A year later, we married in a simple ceremony with only those who genuinely wished us well. 2 weeks afterward, I learned I was pregnant. Gratitude filled me, not fear. David held me and soon moved permanently to Boston without hesitation. Our mornings transformed. David preparing breakfast, sunlight flooding the apartment, hand on my belly as the city slowly awoke. Weekends included the dog rescue center, small acts of care that unexpectedly grounded us. My canine dog walked calmly by our side, loyal, protective. 8 months later, I gave birth to a daughter. David's eyes, my features, laughter and joy in equal measure. Nights were quiet, the dog guarding her sleep, as we watched our small family thrive. In those moments, I realized happiness isn't about proving oneself or winning over the past. It comes from leaving what hurts and rebuilding life with patience and kind choices. I share my story not to claim strength over others, but to show that a woman doesn't need to scream to be respected. Clarity, courage to speak the truth, and patience to rebuild. These are enough. If this story resonates, click like to support me, subscribe, and turn on the bell to follow more stories about truth, boundaries, and how a woman can begin again, slowly but firmly.